I'm Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and I'm here today to tell you that the sweater curse does not exist. And I can prove it using math and logic. Let's face it, there's a lot of logic in this. So if we're going to be doing math, we need to define the terms, right? So what is the sweater curse? The sweater curse is the notion that you better not give a significant other a handmade sweater before you're married, because if you do, it will cause you to break up. There's a lot wrong with this. Let's unpack it, starting with an example of my dating history. I am not somebody who's dated a lot. Well, let's explain it. And don't worry, I know a lot of people are freaking out about math, but I'll walk you through it. You don't need to get out your calculator, you're fine. I'll do the actual math, all right? But it will make sense. I even have a whiteboard that you can totally see my lamp on. So, I have had a grand total of 3 boyfriends in my life. So when we're doing fractions, we have our fraction line, and then underneath is the total number of possibilities. So all of my relationships, I've had 3, all right? Now, out of those 3 relationships, I have married 1 of the guys. I did not marry 2 of the guys. So the top number is always the number of whatever you're testing for that actually happened. So we're testing for relationship failure. In this case, failure means breaking up. So we put 2. So I have a 2/3 failure rate, which, because fractions are hard to kind of understand, we're used to percentages because that's what a lot of grades are based off of. This is 66.67%. Or 67% rounding. See that? All right, 67% failure. Just because a couple breaks up does not mean that it's really a failure on the person's part. It's just a failure of having a long-term committed relationship. It's not a judgment. I should not have remained in those 2 relationships. They were not healthy relationships. I'm glad I broke up with them because that left me available for my husband. And that's a really good, healthy, happy relationship. But in terms of, just not lasting, 67% did not last. And I haven't dated very much. I've only dated a total of 3 guys. Let's take my imaginary friend who has dated a total of 20 guys. And she has broken up with a total of 20 guys. That is 100% failure. 0% success. That is not good. So this actually explains really well why it often feels like there's a sweater curse. If I knitted a sweater for all 3 boyfriends and only one of them succeeded, it would definitely feel like the sweater caused it. My friend, now admittedly this is an imaginary friend, had she given a sweater to each of these 20 guys, oh my gosh, that would have been awful. I mean, heck, even if she hadn't broke up with all 20, if it was 19, that would have been 95% failure and 5% success. Like, those are bad numbers. Those are really bad numbers. Here's the secret with these numbers. Neither me nor my imaginary friend knitted sweaters for any of these people that we dated. So the problem with the sweater curse is that it's discussing a cultural phenomenon called serial monogamy. And what serial monogamy is that you keep kissing a lot of frogs until you find the one that turns into a prince or a princess or whatever. The nature of that is that you're going to date more people than the number of people you marry. And because of that, a lot of relationships are doomed to failure until the one that can stick. And because of that, just those sheer numbers, heck, even if you've only had 2 relationships, that's 1/2. 1 out of 2. That's 50%, which in the United States is still an F. So, we're not doing good on this relationships front anyway, if you're talking strictly numbers and end goal of being in a long-term committed, not breaking up till death do us part situation, whether that's married or not. And I think there's something else with the sweater curse that I don't feel a lot of people really talk about very much. Let me put my board aside. Don't worry, the math portion is over. The biggest issue with the sweater curse, I think, is that the sweater you're giving your boyfriend in this cursed scenario, it kind of reminds me of the baby born to save the marriage. The baby born to save a marriage is a very common phenomenon that never works. Don't try it. But a marriage is on its way out, and usually, stereotypically speaking, the wife feels the husband distancing himself and thinks, okay, maybe if we get pregnant, me being pregnant and then having a baby will cause us to get closer. Usually this is a second or third child, and it worked with the first one. Why wouldn't it work with this one? It might even be a first child sometimes. And so the wife gets pregnant, and one of 2 things happens. It does extend the marriage for a few more years because the husband wants to stick it out to help with the baby, or it brings about the end of the relationship faster because there's a baby. Babies are high maintenance. The parents are exhausted. It's a high stress event, and it makes it so that it is very difficult on a relationship. Having a baby often strains relationships. So it's one of those things where it's not the baby's fault that the parents were having relationship problems and put all this emphasis on this one thing to make it better instead of doing the things that are actually needed to make it better, or accepting that it might be headed for failure. And the same thing happens with a lot of sweaters. The knitter knows how much time, effort, and money goes into a sweater. And quite frankly, it's a lot most of the time. And the person on the receiving end doesn't know how much time, effort. They may or may not be aware of how much money the knitter is spending on yarn, but they don't necessarily know how much this sweater cost in terms of yarn. And oftentimes this is done without asking the significant other what kind of sweater they would like, or even if they would like a sweater. And then the knitter gifts this beautiful sweater, and it's like, oh my goodness, aren't you just so excited? Isn't it lovely? It's beautiful. I love you. Have this sweater. And you're saying, I love you. I think you're worth all this effort. And the receiver says, oh, it's a nice sweater. I didn't really want a sweater. Thanks anyway, though. And don't realize that the knitter is using the sweater as a metaphor for the relationship. And usually there's already communication issues. There might be other relationship issues going on, and it can devolve from there. I have heard of a few people giving sweaters to a significant other, it devolving into a fight and then them breaking up because of the sweater, though that is certainly not what happens every time. Does this mean you can't give your boyfriend a sweater? No, it definitely doesn't mean you can't make a sweater for anybody. You can always make a sweater for whomever you want. Just realize that if you are using the sweater as a metaphor for your relationship, just realize the other person's probably not going to take it that way. And if you have any problems in your relationship, talk them out. Discuss them. Be open and clear and state things even if you think that they should already know it. Because chances are they're not thinking the same way you are. And realize that a sweater won't make your relationship. It sure as heck won't break your relationship. It takes two people to make a relationship, and it takes two people to break a relationship. And if you're really worried about putting all that time, effort, and money into something that isn't well appreciated, two pieces of advice. One, ask them what they want. Do you want a sweater? What color? Do you like this pattern? It won't be a surprise, but you can sure as heck be sure that they're going to like what they get if they want one at all. And two, maybe wait until the relationship is a little bit older and you are certain that you're not going to be breaking up anytime soon. That your relationship is on steady footing. And even if you're not married, because, marriage isn't for everybody and it isn't appropriate for every situation. But once you've made that permanent commitment, at that point, it's probably fine to make that sweater because it's just a sweater. You're making it to keep your loved one warm. And that is awesome, especially if they actually want it. Quick story time. I didn't even start making sweaters. I didn't pick up crochet again until I'd been married a year. I learned to knit the next year. So by the time I made my first sweater, we'd been married 2 years. So those first two boyfriends sure as heck didn't get sweaters. I didn't know how to make one yet. He saw me making my first sweater and he's like, I don't want one of those. And I said, oh, okay, good to know. And he's like, it's nothing against you and knitting. It's just I don't like sweaters, which is legit. He runs warm. He sweats. A few years after that, he decided that he wanted a sweater for an ugly sweater contest. So I made him one, and full of Christmas appliques that we just tied on so we could take them off whenever we wanted and rearrange them or make new ones so he can use the same sweater for many different ugly sweater competitions, and they will be technically different every time. And he has worn that sweater 3 times. One to try it on, one to win that ugly sweater competition, and one because he was actually cold. That was over 3 years. And maybe this year he'll wear it one more time to keep the trend going. Anyway, I hope this clarified the sweater curse for you, and I hope it doesn't throw you off making a sweater for someone you love. And happy crafting! Good luck with any sweaters you're making.